That's a good thing.
Yeah.
We've been here before, though.
No, I was surprised. They probably wait until tomorrow.
That could be it, too.
I'm gonna grab a water, buddy. We ain't talking about nothing.
No.
Talking about Mike.
How's it going?
Hey, what's going on?
Looks like we've got a lot of people to talk to us today.
I see.
Oh,
Yeah,
I love kittens and children. I don't know what
There you gonna get us all in trouble.
You guys do the town meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Larry, you're back on.
Okay,
Yes, this starts off.
all right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the pre-council meeting for the city of Joliet. The Honorable Mayor Robert Odekirk is presiding. Krista, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Odekirk.
Here.
Councilman Dickinson.
Here.
Councilwoman Gavin.
Here.
Councilman Hug.
Here.
Councilman Morris.
Here.
Councilman Mudrin.
Here.
Councilwoman Quillman.
Here.
Councilwoman Reardon.
Here.
Councilman Turk.
Here.
First on the agenda this evening is a presentation, the Joliet Area Historical Museum for the Governor Hometown Award.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. We're happy to come to you tonight with a Governor's Hometown Award, and I hope our coalition members will join me. I see one. Well, they're throughout the room here tonight, and I think it's kind of cool that they're here throughout the room because they represent really, the best of Joliet, and they are a diverse group of over now 70 people from Joliet. Thank you, Barb. And this project, or excuse me, this award represents strictly the volunteer component of this project. And speaking personally, I think we're very much farther ahead than I hope we would be under the best of circumstances. And I think the most important and the biggest reason we are successful is our volunteers. That is always the best part of this story. The Governor's Hometown Award is in its 35th year. I believe there were 2 or 3 other past hometown awards to come to Joliet in those 35 years. So we're happy to have one back here. Again, just happy to acknowledge our volunteerism, which again always has been and will be the best part of the old Joliet prison story. We're glad the mayor could join us down in Springfield to accept the award. So it's something I think that it speaks for itself, but we're happy to be here tonight with our volunteers and as a way to say thank you to you all as well. You put your faith in the organization to kind of handle this project, so we hope we've done right by you, and we hope this is something that continues to unite our community and also challenges us to do more and to do better. So thank you.
Thank you, Greg. A couple things. Thank you to you guys, Rita. I mean, your whole committee has done great work. Are you going to have any year-end update or a kind of a spring preview, what we're looking at next year? Is not tonight, but moving
Sure.
forward, would you be able to come and present?
Absolutely, yeah. We'll have both a year-end as of October 31st, where the season kind of ended, and also some of our plans to do more and go a little bigger in 2020. So happy to do that.
Very good. And we got one of those signs from IDOT. Is
Correct.
that going on Collins Street?
I think that'd be very appropriate for it to be in the Collins Street entryway into the city, but we are able, I believe, to get more for other entryways into the city.
Very good. Okay. Any questions or comments? Thank you. Great work, guys.
Thank you all. I'd like to invite the coalition members up here if they'd like to take a photo, and we'll hand the plaque around to you guys. I think you can see the sign, right? Is that not big? Okay. All right.
Little small, but other than that.
Are you coming up here? You gotta turn this thing around.
Come on, Gil. plaque? Wait, it's over here. Mike, put it
Sign high.
Oh, you can.
Can't see it, Terry.
Who, me?
Yeah, I can't see you.
Oh, okay.
Come on, Terry. It's his birthday, too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Not me.
Thanks, guys. We'll just put it over.
Thank you all. That's nice.
After the day,
Thank you.
after the night. Yeah, there you go.
Next is citizens to be heard on agenda items. This section is for anyone wanting to speak regarding items listed on the agenda, except for items listed under public hearing. Anyone speaking on an agenda item is entitled to speak for a maximum of 4 minutes. It is not a question and answer period, and staff and the city council do not generally respond to public comments. First is Doc Gregory regarding Council Memo 596-19.
Yeah, Chris, if I could just say one thing before we start. I was at the planning commission meeting, and a lot of the comments seemed to kind of trickle into the 2,200 acre proposal that Elwood shot down a couple of years ago. That's not in front of the council, so I would ask the comments to be strictly about the 103 acre proposal and the rezoning, and try not to venture into the bigger picture, because that's not what's in front of us tonight. So, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Doc Gregory, President of Will Grundy Building Trades. I speak in front of you tonight to ask you to vote yes to rezone the 103 acres. We're sitting roughly about 9 days before Thanksgiving, and there's a lot of trade unions back in the audience here, and our out-of-work lists are growing large. We need the work. We need work for a happy Thanksgiving. We need work for our members for a great holiday season. And, you know, when our guys get to work and the buildings that were proposed for the 103 acres, our guys go out, they spend money around the area, around Joliet. They buy new cars, they buy insurance, they go to the banks, get loans, they take their families out for dinner, and we don't have that right now. Our work is diminishing from the seasonal aspect with the weather. So I urge you to vote yes for the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stacy Meyers regarding Council Memo 596-19.
Sorry, I am short. I'll have to do. Good evening. My name is Stacy Meyers, and I am Senior Counsel with Open Lands. We are a conservation organization that connects people to nature where they live. And we have a long history of working with Joliet and many in Will County on several places which are globally special to us all. And our president hails from Lockport. We have some concerns about what's before you tonight, both the rezoning as well as the development agreement, and we wanted to address some of those to you. We urge you at this point to either hold until we have more facts or vote no. So a few of the concerns, and we'll submit in writing tomorrow as well. Road widening. The development agreement provides a commitment by Joliet to widen Breen Road outside of its own jurisdiction. And it widens in particular River Road, even though there's access to 53. We found that peculiar if this is truly about the 103 acres and there is frontage. In addition, it similarly seems to widen Ridge Road all the way down to Spangler Road, which is also outside of its jurisdiction. We are concerned that there are no agreements in place by those who hold jurisdiction to do that work, and yet the commitment is very clear in the agreement. There are traffic projections that are missing, along with the plat. This is a problem in that routing trucks, it looks like with the roads to be widened outside of your jurisdiction, are to the east and south, while all of the planned investments, including a wise one by Joliet with the Hobart Road extension, are occurring west and north with hopefully upward to $1 billion worth of improvements when we are all collectively done. That is very confusing if we're routing trucks into residential areas instead of away from them, especially with the casualties that we all have seen. Eminent domain. The city of Joliet agrees to use eminent domain to acquire land for water and sewer. Where will they run the lines? This is important to provide notice of due process to people whose land would potentially be affected by this development agreement and this commitment, and yet they cannot know to come here to talk to you because there is no plat. There is absolutely no way for them to understand whether or not their property is at stake. That is a huge process problem. Water drawdown. Yes, it's fine to leave the details to the engineers as to where the pipes will go, but do we have any understanding of how much water will be drawn down? You guys are doing a phenomenal job at a water study. How does this affect you? Lake Michigan isn't totally the answer. So what will this do? We don't know. We deserve that answer. Stormwater detention. We're told that this stormwater detention and other greenwashing that they're providing is going to be taken care of by the forest preserves. Have you all talked with the forest preserves about this? Do you have a commitment? Has anyone gotten an answer from them? I think that you probably want that answer to understand how the stormwater is going to be handled before handling their commitment on this. Actions contrary to boundary agreements. We are concerned that moving beyond your jurisdiction, especially with the greater picture, even if it's not discussed tonight at state, would rattle the cage on boundary agreements right now that are at issue at a time that we are coming together and opening our hands in good faith to a comprehensive planning process that I'm honored to be a part of. We have worked with Centerpoint, we have worked with others, and we would certainly hope that Joliet in good faith is coming to the table. And this raises a lot of questions.
Ma'am, you have the 4-minute mark. You wrap it up, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Enterprise zone, blighted land. We are concerned that this basically would be triggered by certain depressed areas in the state. We are wondering how our rich agricultural land and communities that have spoken out against this would be considered depressed and blighted. We would like more of an explanation of how this would be supported. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle Peterson, Council Memo 596-19.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I'd like to encourage you to vote no to the reclassification of 103 acres from residential to I-1 for North Compass Business Park. I think we should keep the zoning residential as it abuts residential. And I have family and friends there. They're very concerned, and I think you should hear them because they matter. Their moms, dads, aunts, uncles, kids, grandkids, grandparents. They're all trying their best to make the best life, like me, like you. I also think a flood study should be conducted before changing a landscape to industrial. It's a huge concern with that Jackson Creek and the changing climate and rainfalls. Do we really know what's around it? I printed out your Southside Comprehensive Plan, floodplain and floodway plan, and right here in this circle is the 103 acres. So you can see that there is a question even on your website with the floodplain and the floodwaters. I think that should be looked into. You've also stated that you're looking at doing a 2-year comprehensive, new comprehensive land use plan. I think all angles, all people should be considered before changing zoning so drastically. In closing, I'd like to say we all matter. Think of all of us. Do your due diligence for the people you represent and your neighbors. Think it through. Your decisions affect many, many, many people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephanie Irvine, 596-19.
Hi, I'm here to obviously speak about Compass Business Park North on the agenda. First, I want to say there's nothing logical about North Point's proposal to build on this 103 acres. It's clear that this is merely an avenue for them to get a foothold to build the entire project. I'm not going to get into that, further as you had requested, but I just want to make it known that this is not an assumption that is fueled by emotion. This is a fact. As if the sheer audacity in naming the project before you, Compass Business Park North, wasn't enough to tip you off that they are intending to use this as a stepping stone, the pithy development agreement is in no way thorough enough to warrant an approval. There are more questions than answers, more problems than solutions, and more hot air than genuine discussions. Within the proposed development agreement, I'd like to call your attention to the 9th page, in which it states that the City of Joliet would help North Point Development secure an enterprise zone. An enterprise zone for 103 acres for a couple small warehouses, really? It's not possible. The Illinois Enterprise Zone Act dictates that enterprise zones must encompass a minimum of a half square mile, which is 320 acres. This project does not meet those minimum requirements. Conveniently, the property that they own adjacent to this project would meet those requirements. And as Tom George unabashedly stated at the community information meeting, North Point intends to develop the rest of their acreage and pursue expansion within the City of Joliet. Will it be by forced annexation? We don't know. This is a farce, and he's blatantly advertising it. Furthermore, I ask you to question, if this project is merely 103 acres, why are you faced with unprecedented union pressure, pages of emails from unions issuing their rank and file support for a $1.2 billion project? Seems quite a bit more than what those 3 parcels could generate. What is so special about a measly 103 acres that is mostly floodplain that is making the unions all but lose their minds? North Point has no limits in trying to secure a deal. That much is evident by their willingness to forge ahead, laughing in the face of boundary agreements currently in force, the decisions already made by neighboring municipalities, and in the face of your constituents and area residents. They have purchased their allies in the unions through healthy campaign donations and promises of grandeur. Do not let them bully their way into manipulating you as a means to their ends. Make no mistake, this proposal is for the entirety of Compass Business Park, and I urge you not to be fooled by North Point's duplicitous facade. Their arrogant behavior thus far has shown that their interests lie in getting this approved at any cost. To allow the project to move forward would be recklessly irresponsible, unconscionable, and would show complete disregard for not only your constituents, but this entire region. I urge you to vote no.
Josh Wagner, 596-19.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Again, my name is Josh Wagner. I'm with the Indiana, Illinois, Iowa Foundation for Fair Contracting. I live here in Will County in Bolingbrook. Our foundation is a nonprofit foundation dedicated to the betterment of the construction industry. So that's why we're created, and that's why we exist, to try to improve the industry. And we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. We work closely with our sister organization, the Illinois Economic Policy Institute. I just want to talk a little bit about the future of Will County, Illinois, and share some facts that many of you are probably aware of. But 20 years ago, Will County had a population of about 500,000 people. Today, it is just under 700,000 people, a 28% increase. And all of the projections from the statistical agencies show that that growth is going to continue and likely even surpass DuPage County by the year 2050, 30 years from now. So as we look to the future, again, the employment situation in Will County, also extraordinary growth. Today, about 215,000 jobs in Will County. 30 years out, we're looking at 360,000 jobs in Will County. So Will County is the largest inland port in the world, 3 million containers, $623 billion in freight value. You've probably all heard the numbers, 3.5% of America's GDP flowing through this county. So the county is at the center of growth and innovation for the transportation, distribution, and logistics industry. And in fact, Will County is so critically important to the nation's economy. It's almost like a vital organ to the American economy. And the amount of business growth that's happening in Will County and the amount of dollars being invested in transportation and infrastructure projects, it's extraordinary. You go on the Will County CED website and you're going to see it. All the information is there. So I think what I'm saying is Will County is going to continue to have explosive growth, one way or another. There's not one of us in this room can stop that. If you understand the rules of economics, you know Will County is going to continue to expand and explode. And you have a situation where most of the counties in the United States will never experience what you have in Will County. They would love to have just a fraction of the good fortune of the growth that Will County has. So growth's going to continue. We can't stop it. We can manage it, but we have to recognize that we're going to continue to benefit from this growth. So I, too, would urge approval of the proposed zoning change. We look to the future of Will County. We recognize that we've got some really great problems to have, problems of growth, problems that most places in America would do anything to have to grapple with. So with that, I will just say thank you for your time and good evening and best wishes as you deliberate and make your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delilah Legrand, 596-19.
Good evening. My name is Delilah Legrand. I am the Jackson Township Assessor, and I'm here just to speak on some concerns that I had with their development plan and the potential buildings that they looked at putting on it. Option A, which seemed to be the most, and I think I confirmed this in the community meeting, probably the most feasible plan in terms of weight limits of the roads, included several small buildings that were around 30,000 square feet, give or take, and then a single building that was just under 200,000 square feet. So I went back, looked through the township industrial buildings. The only buildings that we have currently in the 30,000 square foot range in Jackson Township, which includes Centerpoint Joliet, the majority of it, are parking lots. They are those that we just talked about at the committee meeting, and I know you've had some further discussion on. They're very large container lots with smaller buildings on them. That is the market we have for these 30-some thousand square foot buildings. Those are the only places that they're located currently. The 200,000 square foot building is more in range, you know, with what we see in the area. However, the most comparable property within the city of Joliet, that size, sits right on 53. It's about 173,000 square feet. It currently sits with over 75,000 square feet vacant, and it has for some time. So when their assessed value came up this year, that was something that came to appeal, and we had to look at that with them and discuss their value in terms of this extended length of vacancy. So, you know, the growth is explosive, right? I mean, I'm getting a ton of permits in from the city of Joliet and all of Jackson Township every day, especially in the industrial areas. None of them are for buildings that are this size. The market is not dictating 30,000 square foot industrial buildings currently. They're the monsters, the 900,000 square feet, the 800,000 square feet. And really, that's where you're making a significant amount of, you know, your tax revenue from. I did go ahead and I added up all of the square footages of their projected buildings. Best case scenario, about $31 a foot for these buildings. You would be looking at around $60,000 in tax revenue, fully built out, fully occupied, not appealing values. That's what you're looking at. I think $60,000 in you know, tax revenue in that location is not going to pay for a police officer to be down there, where you've got hundreds of jobs, you know. So, or very little amount of sidewalk. I think Mr. Hugg talked about sidewalks last week and the cost of those. I'm not sure that these buildings are worth it for the city. And that's absolutely something I'm willing to sit down and speak with you about. If you have questions on it, if you'd like to see comparables in the city of Joliet and the district, you're welcome to call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rita Renwick, 596-19.
I'm Rita Renwick, and I'm a citizen of Joliet, and I'm also here speaking on behalf of the Will County chapter of the Audubon Society. I personally object to the rezoning of this property because of the impact it will have on the future of Joliet. Joliet is 167 years old, and we have elected you at this point in our history to determine our future. I took a ride to Breen Road today because I hadn't been out there, and it was a mile from 53 to Farrell Road. I think it was Farrell. And then Rowell, I'm sorry. And then it was another mile to get all the way to Ridge. So you're looking 2 miles away from Route 53. The road I was on is more narrow than the street in front of my house in Joliet. I mean, I know that can be changed, but there were farmhouses along there, and then I went all the way to the end, made a right turn, and there were all the homes that people here are, you know, coming and talking to you and saying, this is where we live. And it's kind of interesting because the land is a little bit rolling there, and you can see where Jackson Creek is. And when these people say, oh, we'll donate it to the Forest Preserve District, well, you know, I'm a volunteer with the Forest Preserve District. Our tax dollars support the Forest Preserve District. People were saying there's flooding that goes along on Jackson Creek, so basically these people would build and then turn it over to us to take care of. That is not a plus. We talk about growth. Growth for growth's sake is, you know, I really believe in looking at a comprehensive plan and deciding where we're going. Great moves in getting the Hobolt Road Bridge put together. That took a lot of effort, but that's one step forward, and if we do this, it's 2 steps back. That's supposed to take traffic off of 53. 53 is historic Route 66, and I spoke to the Plan Commission and said, you know, we're making 53 go right into downtown Joliet. We've got the prison, we've got the historical museum, we have the Rialto, and if we don't, I mean, I don't know that the trucks from down there are not gonna go over to Hobolt Road. They're going to come right into downtown Joliet because that's just what they do. They go wherever. We had them in my neighborhood one day, driving down Douglas towards Midland. So, you know, I really think that we need to take a breath, get a comprehensive plan together, and you know, people who speak about how wonderful it is that we've got all of this growth. It's great, but they're not living here. And I think the people who live here, just if we could be convinced that we're benefiting somehow from all of the warehouses, I mean, that's a job you'll have to do if you approve this, because I think people who live here don't see it. You know, they don't see the benefit. They see the trucks and the accidents and the congestion. That's what they see. And that's kind of what you have to face. I'll close with the quote I gave to the Plan Commission, and it bears listening to again. Aldo Leopold, who wrote Sand County Almanac, how like fish we are, ready, nay eager, to seize upon whatever new thing some wind of circumstance shakes down upon the river of time, and how we rue our haste, finding the gilded morsel to contain a hook. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alicia Deanda.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Feliciano. I am a Joliet resident and also here on behalf of the Warehouse Worker Organizing Committee. I'm also here to urge you to vote no for this rezoning. I think the numbers the gentleman said, you guys have all heard, right? I'm not going to bother you with them, but just like he said, 3.5% of the gross GDP actually passes through here. So you guys are in a very interesting predicament. What does that mean, really? It means lots of money, right? How are we paying for these roads? These guys want to bring more, essentially, work to the community. These jobs are being outsourced to staffing agencies and getting people from out of this community to come in here. Guess what that does, right? There's going to be more traffic. There's going to be more congestion. They're going to be messing with our roads. I'm not here to argue about what's going on with the bridge. We all know that issue, and I know that is not a Joliet City Council issue, but it is a Joliet City issue. And who's really messing with those roads? It's these truckers. We do not have the infrastructure to be able to house anything more than what we already have. And by doing this, it's going to just wreak havoc really in our community. So I do think that each and every one of you needs to think about that when you guys are voting. And I really do feel that you need to vote no for that. Also, for all your constituents, within the last 48 hours, I'm not sure how active you guys are on social media, but there is a petition that's being run, and we've gathered over 1,000 signatures to vote no. And these are from all of your constituents within the Will County area. I mean, this is an issue that we all need to pay attention to. These places are talking about, you know, they want to bring jobs to the community. They want to build the community. I don't disagree that there's going to be expansion happening, but at what cost? What matters more, the money or our lives, essentially? Because of the accidents, because of the diesel matter particulate that these trucks are actually bringing out and polluting into our city, right? So I think that's what each and every one of you needs to think about. You guys all live within the community. You guys all drive within the community. You buy and shop and do everything within the community. This is you guys too. This is your families. This is our families. These are your constituents. So I strongly urge you again to vote no for this, and I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Kirby, 596-19.
Hi, I'm Kathy Kirby, and I live with a watershed next to me and Jackson Creek right behind me. When we had that 7 inches of rain, that water was roaring behind us. You guys are wanting to come in and change the values of our homes, our trucks. You can't even go down. I get up at 4 in the morning. You go down some of these roads. See what these trucks are coming through. Roads are not supposed to have these trucks on them. We don't have the police anywhere to help us. So we live next to the watershed. My question is, are you here for our water or are you here for the 100 acres? With everything that's going on with all your water problems, I begin to wonder. You know, they say to use union workers. There's nothing against union workers, but half the stuff that they build in these these places are all prefab. They're not all union jobs. These guys are going to come in and they're going to do their work for a short time, and then they're going to leave, and it won't be the union workers that they're going to hire. So you know what he said? This is what he said to you. Remember, we buy insurance. Well, we buy insurance too. We buy cars. We buy lawnmowers. We remodel our homes. We have taken care of those homes forever. And now you're wanting us to just say it's okay. Surely every single one of you have driven around here with the trucks. We have no more room for these trucks. I was down in Lockport today, and the truck turned and took out the whole corner block. Done. That was it. There was backed up traffic everywhere. You know what? So we want a happy Thanksgiving too. So why don't you think about all the people and all the homes that you're going to affect when, you know what? We moved out there because we didn't want to be in Joliet. But you can't even come down 53 anymore. It's dangerous. Coming to this meeting, you get hit almost 2 times to come down. You have to have a police officer at Amazon to do the traffic. I had one guy come on the side of the road. He was on the shoulder to get to work in time. We don't want more. We don't need more. We have empty places. Don't take all that away from us. Give us a happy Thanksgiving too.
Thank you.
Elise Kendron.
Good evening, Council. My name is Elise Kendra. I am a Joliet citizen. I'm here to ask you to vote no today and to basically do what everyone that has been coming here to put everything on the table and really assess whether or not the long term, this is what you want your hometown award city to look like. I have lived in 5 states. I have been a resident of Joliet for 10 years. And so I arrived here in the Great Recession. And since then, I have watched the growth and the changes that we've all seen in the last decade. And I give pause I don't think what we have is what every place wants. And I think that's why it's here. I think it's something about Joliet that gives it a great opportunity to be a place where economies can grow in our upcoming e-commerce that's going to get even bigger. But we're doing that job for the rest of the country, and I don't think other people are seeing what we're seeing when we live here. So I want you to really have big eyes and see what that looks like, what it really truly looks like. Because if we just start saying, yes, come, create more spaces for this to happen without having some sort of bigger plan of what we want out of it, I think we're going to be taken advantage of more and more. So please vote no and look at all of the ramifications for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric Gorder, 596-19.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm here representing the City of Joliet. I'm a resident of Joliet. I'm also a professor at Joliet Junior College. One of the things that I take note of that is that when I'm in the classroom, one of the things that I take pride in is that I teach and I educate my students. I have them look, I have them see, I have them value what's around them. One of the things that I have in my classroom is that I have a lot of students that come from hardworking families that are struggling. And so the gentleman behind me, I know what they're looking for. And I understand that they need work as well. But this is a short-sighted, short-term goal. When those shelves are up, when that electrical's in, what's left? Okay? What's left? Their jobs are done. Okay? And so what happens then? We employ temporary workers to come in and fill those warehouse orders. We have truck drivers that are coming in to do that. And everybody's already talked about what's happening to the infrastructure within our city. As I moved here, I was shocked at the streets. And that was 9 years ago. They've gotten nothing but worse. And they've only gotten worse because more industry has come in, yet the problem wasn't solved in the very beginning. You have to have that infrastructure settled. If you want to put in a warehouse, you've got to have the streets already done. You've got to have the water problems already solved. You cannot build this without having the interior ready to go. This is so incredibly short-sighted, and it's a horrible thought to even understand that you would do this. And I can only hope that you're willing to educate yourselves on all sides of the issues and do a good job. And I hope you can do it better than the 19-year-olds that I teach in my classroom. You know, we're expecting that from you as citizens, to bring forth all of your energy, all of your mindset, and all of your value that you have for this city. And if you cannot do that, we have no value for you. As far as I can understand, I'm not sure where the boondoggle sits. If it sits on the point of North Point or if it sits on the point of this council. But somebody's going to shove a boondoggle through here. And somebody's going to look like a bunch of suckers. It's either the group in front of us or it's the group behind us. You know, as I stand here, I understand the burden's going to take place on the citizens of Joliet. We're the ones that are going to run down these roads. We're the one that's driving with these trucks. We're the ones that are recognizing that the jobs are not going to be there. This is all going to get automated, okay? There's going to be hardly any jobs left in these warehouses. And the jobs that are coming in are temporary jobs that are not even living wages. And so it doesn't work. It makes no sense. And so I can only hope that you're willing to educate yourselves to figure out the situation before you can even think about going forward on this one step further. And so I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Next is Ernie regarding Council Memo 596-19.
I am Ernie Quarter, and I try to get my community into my new school, always to get my school right. And it is always way I keep my learning always great. And speak up for the warehouses and our positions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Erin Gallagher, 596-19.
My name is Erin Gallagher. I'm from Joliet. I was born and raised here. I was baptized at St. Jude's in Marycrest. I attended Taft. I attended Joliet Central. I'm a Steelman. I'm a very proud Steelman. I am not other people. Many of you already know my name. I've been vocally opposed to North Point. And I'm not here to tell you about the bald eagles that are just starting to nest in our community. And I'm not here to tell you how much we hate trucks, because I understand that we are here to talk about the some 100 acres. And that it is a rezoning issue, and it is not a transportation issue. So I'm going to limit my comments to that. Obviously, this is a very emotional thing, but I am here to say that I do not envy any of you on this board. You all have a formidable task, and you are getting, I'm sure, amazing pressure, largely from the back of the room. And I ask that you take a look at the history of the voting of this board. I don't need to tell you how you voted. I am not necessarily opposed to 100 acres becoming light industrial. This is a terrifically difficult region in Will County. It is a terrifically difficult region in Joliet. There's no question that there's no crystal ball for you to figure out what is the right thing, and you have to really put a lot of due diligence into it. So understanding that 100 acres of light industrial, you're not going to get a large argument from me out of that. But when Pasquale Homes, I believe it was Pasquale Homes, came before this board and asked for it to be rezoned, because he said, and I was at that meeting that day, strangely, he said he couldn't sell any houses. That is a terrible region. You can't sell any houses out there. I get it. I understand that. And I respect that. I respect that that's basically the decision that you all have. But the bottom line is he came with a plan. He came with a plot. He came with decision. He came ready to go. And these gentlemen right here show up with half a loaf. They don't have a plan for you. They don't have plots. They don't have roads. They don't have plumbing. They have pressure from the big gun at the back of the room. I'm asking you not to say necessarily that you will not rezone. I'm asking you to send them back to the drawing board and put together a plan that you all can take a look at and respect. Let's make them earn it. You don't want to be their patsies. You don't want to be their puppets. That's fine, I get it. Make them earn it. Show them who's boss. If you all really, honest to God, believe that this is a separate issue from the 2,200 acres, times 3, by the way, is what I'm hearing, that this plan that they have has nothing to do with this 100 acres. And if you vote yes tonight, that you still have the opportunity to vote no later, okay. Make them earn it. Let them know you're in charge and that you are not going to let the big guns tell you what to do. Good night.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on an agenda item this evening?
Mr. Mayor, City Council, Councilwoman, glad to see you up and around.
Thank you.
Hope you're healing well. I don't even know why we're here tonight. A couple months back, Mayor of Elwood stood right here. He was told he could not have his boundary agreement renewed because Joliet is spending $246,000 for a comprehensive plan on how to develop the city. But it appears that only applies to the north, east, west. Councilman Morris, don't apply to your area because you're not allowed to be participating in that because you've got this project before you and it's been made up. Looks like it might be made up for you, not to have any input. The tax revenue, somebody had mentioned 61K or 60K. I took notes at that meeting and it was 61K, don't much difference. That's not a lot of revenue for the city of Joliet for 103 acres. But I certainly could probably give you 2.5 times that revenue by eliminating a job, Attorney General's job. That's would cover that expense right there, or the lost revenue. The infrastructure needs to be in place before more truck traffic. There was 3 different times, Mr. Mayor, you were quoted as saying the roads need to be developed before we put a project in out there. And now I believe the last time I read news in the newspaper that you were for this project. I think it's important to put the trades to work. They need a living also. But I say put them to work building the infrastructure. That $50 million for Route 53 is not a lot of money when you talk about what is going to be road improvements. So that's why we're going to vote this in. That's not a lot of money. The Hobart Bridge, I think, Mr. Mayor, at my community meeting in our neighborhood, you said there was, I think, a $188 million investment in that project out there. Let's get that project going, put a lot of people to work. And that road out there, as somebody had already said, will take a lot of traffic off Route 53. And then you can concentrate on getting that road rebuilt out there. But I don't know how you can tell the mayor you don't want to renew the boundary agreement and then start a project like this on the south side of Joliet with no input from District 5. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on an agenda item?
It's not on North Point.
Would you like to go first?
Oh, I didn't see you coming.
No problem.
I'm here to talk to you about your Memo 597, the cannabis ordinance. I was at the Planning Division. They talked about it at their meeting. I just got a few words. Illinois has legalized cannabis. Everyone has legal access to it, no matter where you live. All drugs have issues. All of them do, and they have problems. Alcohol, cigarettes, those are well documented. Cannabis will have its own. Well, cannabis does not bring in, or does bring in, the possibility of more health issues and more emotional issues and social issues to us. But we are currently dealing with these issues anyway. Not selling cannabis in Joliet won't change any of that. There'll still be people smoking, it'll still be around. What we need to do is adopt the ordinance to sell it in Joliet, get those tax revenues, and then you as the city council, being the good stewards you are, take that money and put a large portion of it to dealing with social welfare issues, economic issues, and mental health issues for the community to get rid of the root problem that we have in Joliet with this additional money. If we don't, the money will go somewhere else, and we will still have the problems. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Margie Sepon. I'm a resident of Joliet. I was going to hold comment until the end of the meeting. I wanted to hear what North Point Development was going to present. But based upon the previous comments, I felt I needed to come up now. This isn't a we against us, meaning we against them. I apologize. we're not against unions. We want unions to have jobs. But we also want the buildings that they build to provide sustainable jobs to the residents of Joliet, good paying jobs. I have a very, very strong fear that Joliet is going to repeat history, not once, not twice, but 3 times. The steel mills, right? Concentration many decades ago. Steel mills never leave, correct? They left. Manufacturing, and most importantly, Caterpillar, of course, would never leave. Caterpillar is gone. Good paying jobs. Now we are on the cusp of what I believe a serious labor disruption with automation and artificial intelligence. I am not saying we can and we want to prevent that from happening. It is exciting and terrifying in the same breath. I think Joliet needs to plan for the future, not just for the now. How many jobs will actually be available in these warehouses? Amazon right now is presenting commercials on TV in which their employees are saying, I'm not going to be here long term. Isn't it great that Amazon is paying for my college education so that I can move on to the next step? It's no secret anymore. Warehouses, logistics firms will be replacing human labor with capital, and that capital will be automation. What is the plan when that happens? We keep increasing our concentration of warehouses in the area. What's the plan? Long-term unemployment can be devastating to the Joliet and the entire region. It's not just Joliet. We have a problem that is brewing. From the 1980s, we had the highest unemployment rate in the country. Downtown Joliet has never recovered. That is my fear in putting in more and more warehouses, unions, union labor. Build buildings in which there'll be sustainable jobs. We need to sustain and grow our economy. My final point is, it has been brought up that the Will County area will grow to 1 million+ people. But in the next breath, I hear that there's no demand for residential housing. Well, where are all of these people going to live? Houses will need to be built. So I ask that you take a spherical view for now and for the future on what the effect of this 103 acres, and it's very difficult after reading the development agreement to see that this is truly 103 acres, will affect the Joliet region in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
If you're going to speak, please line up so we can do this orderly. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Diane Sewing. I live in Jackson Township. I'm actually the Jackson Township Supervisor, but I'm coming as myself. I'm speaking on my behalf. I would like to ask you to vote no for the North Point project. It is not good for the area. It is similar to the Cedar Creek that you voted against recently because it does neighbor existing homes and residents. And these residents aren't people there are a handful that have just recently bought and sold, but they're lifelong residents. There are people that have lived there for years. So if you just take that into account, greatly appreciate it. 53 is a mess. and we need to get that fixed. Also, I wanted to reiterate, if you could do the research, like one of the previous speakers had said about the enterprise zone, that's crucial, huge. And just please table it. What's the rush? In 9 days, it's Thanksgiving. Are they gonna start work in 9 days? I highly doubt it. So please vote no, and just do the research, and we'll go from there. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Seeing none, we'll pass it to the city manager to discuss tomorrow night's agenda items.
Okay, thank you and good evening. Tomorrow night's agenda is long. First off, we will have a introduction of Norris Hamilton, who is the new Harrah's general manager. Some of us on staff have already met him. I think you'll find him engaging and certainly view him as a true asset to the community. So we look forward to having a long relationship with Mr. Hamilton in his future role. Under Mayor's report, we have several items. We have a proclamation that honors.
Steve, is your microphone on?
Yes, sorry. Under Mayor's report, we have two items. One is a proclamation honoring the St. Paul's baseball team, and we have Arts Commission appointment, Valerie Devine from the Rialto. Under council committee reports, pretty much a full gamut of reports. We have economic development, finance, land use and legislative, public safety, public service, as well as the ad hoc city manager search committee. Under consent agenda, we have approval of minutes, invoices, and payroll. Probably the first interesting thing, if you skip down to 58719, we have position vacancies. We only have one this week. It's a retirement of a school crossing guard coordinator, and that's due to retirement. Council Memo 588-19 is the renewal of our group health insurance, dental, vision, and life insurance programs. Happy to report our Blue Cross Blue Shield Dearborn National relationship continues, and we're projected to experience a 6.3% reduction in our medical, a slight increase, 0.3% increase in dental, but the overall net effect is estimated to be a reduction of about $1,127,000 for next year's budget. Finance Committee will report on this tomorrow. Council Memo 589-19 is the 2020 roadway reconstruction program. Staff is looking to get a little bit of a jump start. This is currently budgeted in the 2020 budget, which you'll soon start the review process on. But this allocates $810,000 in MFT funds, and by us starting now, it allows us to get a head start on engineering and bidding so that we can get into the bid process early spring of next year. Any questions on consent agenda items? Under licenses and permits, we have two drive-through permits. First off, there's that long-awaited Chick-fil-A. That is located at 2705 Plainfield Road, and this is the site of the old Lone Star Steakhouse. We've had our engineering staff review the circulation and stacking plan, and this is recommended for approval. The second item is Memo 529-19, and it's a Dunkin' Donuts located at 4702 Caton Farm Road. And if that address sounds familiar, it's because the council already approved a drive-through at that location. The developer has come up with a better plan, even though they had approval. What they're proposing to do is to move the Dunkin' Donuts to the east side of the building, which will create some additional storage and stacking capacity. And our staff does feel that this is pretty much a superior product as opposed to what was originally approved, even though both would have worked. Under ordinances and...
Question.
Yes.
Were the neighbors out there that live around there, were they notified of that change?
Dunkin' Donuts, right?
Right, the Dunkin' Donuts on Caton Farm? Because we already approved the one side, but now they're gonna move it, the drive-through?
Okay, for a drive-through, I don't believe there's notice that goes out for the neighbors.
Right, but my concern is, it was already approved to be in one spot. Is this gonna be a better spot for the neighbors, or is it gonna affect?
It's not in a different spot. They added additional stacking capacity, so additional cars can stack up in the morning when there's a high demand. It's always been shifted. The last time we looked at it in August, they already shifted the Dunkin' Donuts to the east side of that building. And they're gonna demo a portion of the west side of the building to give additional stacking.
Sorry, my misstatement.
Okay, that's not
That's
what
my
Steve
fault.
said. That
Yeah,
was
that's
what
my
I asked.
misstatement.
Yeah, no, the building was, in August, we already approved it for that.
Right, okay, all right, just
Okay.
double checking.
Sorry for confusing you.
Thanks.
Under ordinances, Council Memo 594-19 is an ordinance that would approve an increase in parking rates for our parking fund. A little bit of history here and background. About 5 years ago, the city undertook a study to evaluate the condition of both of our parking decks. There were a number of deficiencies that were noted, and approximately $2 million in total repairs were identified as being required. The city did not take any action on those repairs. And in addition, ongoing, we've had the obvious need for security upgrades at our lots, along with technology. I'd like to say improvements, but there really is no technology at our decks. The parking fund on top of that has been running a deficit for a number of years, and we basically have not raised rates for a significant time period. To basically turn the system around, to move from a deficit to a break-even or even a sustainable approach, along with really taking care of the assets that we have in the parking system, staff is proposing that we undertake the necessary engineering and put in upgrades, put in technology, and basically fund it with a $3 million bond issue. This would primarily be paid for with parking revenues, and a significant rate increase would be required. To give you the specifics of what this ordinance calls for, within the parking decks, at present, the monthly passes are presently $40. They propose to go from $40 to $60 per month. The hourly rates there are 50 cents an hour. We're proposing to go to $1. Riverwall parking, which is immediately west of the AT&T building, that's presently $15. The proposal is to go to $20 a month. Zone A street parking, which includes the Rialto lot, and this is the street parking that we primarily think of as the core of our downtown. We're proposing going from $1 to $1.50 per hour. Zone B street parking, which is primarily north of the core downtown, that's presently 50 cents an hour, proposing that to go to 75 cents an hour. Our commuter parking lot, the general lot's going from $1 to $1.50, and then the Mayor Art Schultz lot, which is adjacent to the Rock Island station by the train station, that's presently $4. We're proposing that to go to $5. Should point out that there are a number of development agreements that exist downtown for residents. Anything that is in an agreement that locks in rates for those parkers would remain. So this only applies to basically people who are not subject to a development agreement. This has been discussed at the Finance Committee as well as Public Service Committee meeting. And for us to maintain, let's call it not even a 21st century parking lot, really a 20th century parking lot with some of the tech upgrades, we really do need to start spending some money on our parking system. So we know that this will cause some pain and some gnashing of teeth, but there really is an alternative to basically operate our parking system in a way that is safe, is efficient, and basically handle some of the structural needs that we've got. So we're certainly happy to answer any questions about this, both from the finance side along with the engineering side.
Yeah.
I'd like to explain. I mean, there's been quite a bit of talk on social media, if you will, publicly about this. And I just want to explain or remind people that the parking fund is, in fact, an enterprise fund. It's not unlike the sewer and water fund. Sewer and water is required to produce its own revenues to pay for itself. And the parking fund hasn't done that. Now, I know some of the things that folks have said is, well, there's other smaller communities like, Lennox or what have you, that don't charge for the parking. They have very little parking compared to what we have. They don't have decks, which take a great deal, which has been neglected for years, a great deal of maintenance and now repair. They don't have even as many surface parking lot spots as we do. This is the type of thing that the users should foot the bill. The only other option would be that to let them continue to deteriorate at the current rate and quicker over the next decade, and then be extremely dangerous, or to privatize them. And if you privatize them, if you don't understand what privatizing will do to the parking rates, all you got to do is ask the people of Chicago how that worked out for them. Instead of going from 50 cents to $1, I think they went back there from $3 an hour to $8 an hour in some places, because you introduce the concept of profit. And in a case where you have shareholders, that profit's got to be rather big to pay the shareholders. So this is really not something groundbreaking. I know they brought up Naperville and saying they have free parking. There is no such thing as a free lunch. I think all adults understand that. Naperville passes it on the way I understand it in my research. They fund it in large part through something similar to an SSA type fee to their businesses. The businesses pay for the parking. They also have, I believe, even for a house appraised relatively close to any house you might live in, if such a thing exists, they have quite a bit more in property tax that they're charged. This is an attempt, in my opinion, and I hate raising taxes and rates whenever we can avoid it, but this is an enterprise fund that's got to fund itself, and it's got to be user supported. You know, frankly, if somebody said, well, people aren't going to use the parking, they're going to find an alternative, well, then some of those surface parking lots, if that were true, and I don't think it will be, some of those surface parking lots can be converted and sold to somebody to develop into buildings, if that were to be true. I don't think that's going to be true. I believe that we need the parking down there that exists now. People will use it. And this increase does not make us like, well, certainly not anywhere near what Chicago charges. And it doesn't make us, I would like, if you guys can, I mean, it's not a fair comparison to compare smaller communities of 20 or 25,000. But if you can put together a list of what people are charging for their parking. You know, somebody had mentioned Plainfield. We've all got a lot of friends to our neighbors to the north here in Plainfield. You know, we should do what they do for parking downtown Plainfield. Downtown Plainfield is essentially one street, about a half mile long. So, yeah, they have the free parking there, and, you know, the businesses do support that. Our downtown is just a tad bit bigger than the one street. So, you know, our parking spans out. It feeds the railway and commuters and so forth, which downtown Plainfield doesn't. But just to have an idea, if you guys can put together a list of the surrounding communities and what they're charging for the parking, and certainly make the difference between what their parking serves, is it commuter related or not? Again, I hate raising any taxes or any fees, but as I said, yeah, this is headed for a disaster if we don't get this under control.
We could pull some information together and actually pass it out at the dais prior to tomorrow's council meeting.
Thank you, Steve.
Mayor.
That's it, Mayor.
Yes.
I have some questions. First of all, how much is another consultant going to cost here? Do we really need another consultant?
This is actually for engineering. I mean, the study that was done was sort of a structural assessment. We have to actually design the improvements. So we need to have somebody come in here, literally identify if there's a specific crack, not just saying there's a crack, but saying here's a crack and here's what it's going to take to fix it. So in effect, it will start the process of us actually coming up with some bid documents so that we could come up with those cost estimates, which would actually be necessary before we would go off and do a bond issue.
Well, before we do all that, though, do we actually know what it does cost and how much we're losing overall? Say, for example, we have two different decks and metro lots. What lots are losing money and what lots are not? I mean, we have an estimate here of a deficit, but do we really have a handle on all the costs of money that we're supposedly losing? And are some decks more profitable than others? And we have parking spaces in different zones downtown. I mean, do we have a handle on that, how much all that, what each one brings in as far as revenue and what's actually losing? So maybe we need to look that over before we start raising the parking rates. Maybe they should be more.
Well, keep in mind we have a system. You know, this isn't it's not a system where every lot has some sort of estimate of cost based upon the operation of that lot. We're over $300,000. I'm looking at our finance director. $300,000 fund deficit, $1 million cash deficit, or I have that backwards?
It says right here. It's estimated to operate a deficit of $300,000. While the cash balance will be nearly $1 million in the red, adjustments are required to correct the system going forward. But how much do we actually know, how much to correct the system if we don't know how much we're actually losing? These are just
We're
guesstimates.
Well, no, they're not guesstimates. This is in effect the system. I mean, it's not to be viewed as 7 lots and, you know, I'm making up a number, 750 parking spaces. This is an actual parking system. We have people that do maintenance in all the lots. We have people who do enforcement in all the lots. We have the need to do improvements based upon, you know.
But are the improvements going to help as opposed to building new? Because these parking decks are pretty old, and if we just keep putting Band-Aids on them.
Well, they're 40 years old, and in effect, structural rehabilitation occurs on decks. I mean, if we're talking about building a new deck, you're probably, generally it's $15,000 to $18,000 a space. So you're talking $30-40 million of money that would go into new decks for no additional rate of return. So what we're looking at is basically trying to reverse the fact that we haven't done the necessary maintenance in these decks over time. We haven't kept rates steady to basically fund these improvements, and we're trying to make a dramatic shift, unfortunately, within a single fiscal year. So it's a system. I mean, that's the only point I'm trying to make, that you can't break it into its component parts and say, oh, this lot would be okay at its current price, but this lot needs to go from X to Y. It's a system.
But again, this brings me back to this thing I've been talking about for years, the maintenance fund to take care of our properties.
Correct.
And we just keep putting Band-Aid fixes, and we're not really taking care of anything we actually own, and now we're here to this.
Well, this is actually the start of something, as Councilman Hug pointed out, you know, this is an enterprise fund.
Right.
As we've done in the water and Suhr fund recently, we've started to make strides of putting together money for some of those future replacements. That's what this starts to do by getting those rates to a level where not only can you pay for the debt service, but you start to build up a reserve. So that's the long-term goal. It's not, I mean, we can't do both in a single year. So I don't have much of a solution other than say this is the start of the improvement of that fund.
But is it going to be enough? That's my question.
Once we get the cost estimates done in the bids, that answer will be no. If it comes in higher, we do have a special service area downtown along with TIF that could potentially supplement this. We are subsidizing some parking rates based upon some of the redevelopment agreements. It's my intent to utilize some of those funds to make up the difference between where a development agreement may say a particular parking rate is versus what the market rate would be. On the SSA side, if we find ourselves with some significant, you know, let's say it comes in at $4 million, it would be real hard to justify rates now to get to that level of debt. So I think we need to start looking at things like our SSA, which helps fund economic development initiatives. I think it's a fair statement that if we don't have 2 parking decks downtown, there is no economic development. So we will need to find a plan B or a plan C if these costs come in significantly higher. But, you know, we went from 2 million in that original estimate. We're assuming inflation plus the technology, plus some other intangibles. And if the bids come in lower, then we don't have to do a bond issue to that extent. If it comes in higher, we have to come up with some alternative funding plan.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, I have a couple of comments.
Yeah.
I agree with you about this being a dramatic shift within one fiscal year. I can't argue with the numbers. I'm curious, have you run this past City Center Partnership? And what was their response to this?
At the last meeting, I indicated that it was up, it's part of the budget process. And I mentioned because of the timing where we have to get permits printed in advance of 2020, I did indicate that it would be on tonight's council meeting agenda.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that maybe we should be looking at. Half of downtown has been redesignated a floodplain. So we know insurance rates are being jacked up on those businesses right now. I'm not sure, again, it's been to 2 committees, but it's really more of a policy decision. We do a lot to incentivize businesses and now residents coming to downtown Joliet. And this is kind of working in a different direction. You know, I own a downtown business. Councilman Hug, you talk about making the users pay for it, and that's appropriate, but there's other options. There's other places to eat than the downtown restaurants. There's other office buildings or places that people can locate at. So, again, I can't argue with your numbers, or Mr. Gadadi, you're right. It seems like we're really jumping into this with both feet. And again, it flies in the face of a lot of the other incentive packages that we're putting out to get people to come downtown or to invest in downtown. I think we should be looking at, not so much from the finances, which are correct, but from the policy decision, is this a track we want to take? And I'll use like the Rialto funding as an example. You know, I don't know if we get a return on that money or not, but it's not just to keep the theater afloat, it's because we know how it helps the downtown businesses, the restaurants and the bars on the nights of shows. And so it never was, you know, I know Councilman Hugg, you've argued this for 8+ years now, but there's more behind it. It's not simply, a zero-sum game. And I think this is kind of the same thing. Maybe if we are running a deficit, it might not be the end of the world if it's helping the downtown businesses or helping new businesses to come in. So I can't argue the finances, but I wonder from the policy standpoint if this is the direction we really want to go in.
Well, keep in mind, there are two separate issues. One is the deficit, which is kind of ongoing status quo. The other part of that is doing the repairs before, 2 million becomes 4 million, becomes 5 million. So you're not off base with regard to, are there revenues that get thrown into the pot that could subsidize? The answer is yes, but that assumes that nothing else happens with regard to structural needs. It also ensures that there's no increase to the customer experience of the decks. I hear nothing good about the fact that we don't take credit cards, sometimes we don't have change, sometimes the elevators don't work. There are any number of things that basically make people crazy when they use those decks that we could solve. With regard to the other sources of revenues, clearly every time there's a Rialto show and people are eating downtown, they're paying food and beverage tax, they're paying sales tax. Revenue's being spun off of that. If there was some way where we could quantify that, just suck that out and put it in a parking fund, what it means is now we have less money for police, for fire, for public works, because in effect it's going into that pot. So by treating it like a business, the enterprise fund concept, the goal is to make the users pay for the system as opposed to the city as a whole. We could fund the bond issue with a property tax increase. And I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just saying that would be a method by which we all kind of share the pain of parking. But in effect, we're taking the approach, just like a water and sewer bill, that the user itself should pay for use of the system. But from a policy perspective, if the council wanted to go in a different direction to fund this, certainly from a staff perspective, we just want to get the problem solved. This is what we think is, the most business-oriented method, but certainly there are other possibilities, and we would be happy to entertain those.
But one other question on those lines. I know within the last year, we had a developer approach us about buying the Scott Street parking deck from the city. Have we vetted that and decided that's the wrong way to go?
I've had that discussion internally. I've had that discussion even with that particular individual. If we sell off 50% of our parking spaces in a deck, I would liken that to Chicago selling off their parking system. That individual can then create free parking to take care of some of his business customers, which means now the people that are paying us are going somewhere else free, which means we have less money in our system. Or that person could basically come up with rates that are above and beyond. So I think control, whenever you have an asset that is really a public service, unless you're selling the entire parking system, meaning all the street spaces, all the decks, everything that there is, I think it would do harm versus good. We could always come up with a couple $100,000 of sales value, because that deck's going to need over $1 million worth of improvements. That couple $100,000 isn't going to get you very far with the repairs in the other deck, and you're going to lose revenues. So it has been discussed. Certainly it's something that I can't prove it, but I think it goes against that whole aspect of the city retaining an asset that we could then control and use to generate money.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Council Memo 594-19, this is ordinance approving a special use permit which relates to an electric security fence that's been requested at 251 Republic Avenue.
It's 595.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Sorry.
It's a long night already. 594 dash, I'm sorry, 595, I'm doing it again.
We're done with that.
I have two numbers here, that's my problem. Special use permit for an electric security fence at 251 Republic. The business in question is a truck repair facility, and this is something that was unanimously recommended for approval by our zoning board of appeals. Any questions on this? See if I get this number right. I think I will. Memo 596-19, which are two items relating to the proposed North Point development. We do have representatives from North Point here. Just to summarize what the two items are, first off, we have a request for rezoning property, which is 103 acres, located on the south side of Breen Road, 1/2 mile east of Rowell. And the companion item is a resolution that approves a development agreement for that development. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Osterberger, and he does have the North Point team here as well.
Good evening, Tom Osterberger, 111 North Ottawa Street. I'm one of the attorneys for the petitioner. Tonight we have Patrick Robinson of North Point, Tom George of North Point, and we have engineer Bill Bone of Jacob and Hefner and Tim Schrogen from Kimley Horn. I'm going to ask Tom George to add some more detail to the memo you received from staff, but clearly we're looking for approval. Some background on this. 2006, 899 acres were annexed into the city of Joliet. Some of it was industrial, some was residential. And this parcel was part of that. 2007, the South Side Comprehensive Plan was adopted by the City Council. It, in that plan, had the zoning that was approved in the previous year. We went on to see those industrial pieces develop, and we went on to see the residential pieces that were annexed sit undeveloped. We know 2008, 2009, 2010 what happened. We saw the UP yard increase, get approved, increase, Centerpoint increase, and we saw the housing market go away. You heard tonight from some of our objectors that there is not a big need for residential, and that's why we're here. The petitioner has a contract to purchase, wants to use this for industrial. The South Side plan that was approved contemplated change. It refers to existing industrial progress and unique opportunity for expansion of the industrial use. Regardless of what is said, I've lived here my whole life. Many of you were here in the 80s. We know what the unemployment looked like. These are challenges for sure. But we have low unemployment and we have opportunity. Okay? We can debate whether or not we like that opportunity versus one that may or may not exist. But what's in front of us right now presents an opportunity. This property, we're seeking to reclassify it because it doesn't have a use for residential as zoned. The Southside Comprehensive Plan also goes on in Article 5 to say some of the residential will be reclassified to industrial. It contemplates that. It contemplates the increased industrial activity down here. And you guys know what it's been like. I mean, this is the area of Joliet where people are coming to do industrial. There are not a lot of industrial areas left. So we're here before you. We don't think there is a demand for residential. We're seeking to reclassify. And I will point out that the city of, the village of Manhattan understood this in 2008 in their comprehensive plan. South of Arsenal Road, within their planning jurisdiction, outside of yours, they have the whole area immediately south of Manhattan Road classified as industrial. That's what's proposed in their comprehensive plan. So, you know, we don't always like how things develop, but we also don't control them. And petitioner tonight wants to be there with a good plan, and I'll invite Tom George to make some additional comments on that plan.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council, staff members. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time, and I will go very quickly because we've already been here a long time. I will thank all the people who got up and spoke before me. Really appreciate their comments. Every time we hear their concerns, their passion, we learn, And so we learned more tonight, and so I appreciate that they took the time to come here and speak, and that you took the time to listen to them. So my name is Tom George. I'm with the Chicago office of North Point. And I'm going to run through, you all have a lot of industrial experience, going all the way back to Rock Run where I started my career. So I don't need to tell you about the industrial. You have a tremendous code. Your code has matured and matured and matured, and I think it's really probably the best comprehensive industrial code that I've run across in all categories. So kudos to you. That's why the development agreement is short, frankly. There's not a lot of reason to offer or need a lot of changes. It really is very comprehensive. So I'm just going to focus on the things that will be different or unique about this project. And in that, we're going to have a few categories to talk about: people, environmental, and community. So first of all, people. And people to us are neighbors and employees. That's our first line of concern, are the neighbors immediately around the project, and then the employees who will work inside. So as you can see from the layout here, and I apologize if you have trouble seeing it, I know it's small, but we are planning a large berm adjacent to residential. We have one piece of residential to the east of the north buildings, and we have, of course, the neighborhood to the south and southeast of the southern buildings. The site is crisscrossed by 3 pipelines, as you may already know, which does make it a very difficult site for residential for sure. 2 of those pipelines are hazardous. So we've had to work around those. It has been to the benefit, I think, of the residential community in that it has pushed the site plan and pushed the buildings further north. One of the things that's important on here is that in one of the neighborhood meetings, which we had 2 of, somebody mentioned, hey, do you really need that entrance into the building that faces Ridge at the south end of the building? And we said, well, no, we could probably survive without that. So that's one of the things we did to make sure we were accommodating our neighbors. We pulled that entrance out. Now the only entrance on Ridge is at the very north end of the development. We do have this a very large berm. Your code has a 15-foot minimum separation plus a tremendous landscape plan. We've increased that separation to 60 feet. We feel that's more appropriate. That allows us to get a much larger, higher berm. And then we are be using your landscaping requirements to go with that. It also requires a fence on top. One of the things that'll be different here is, as I've committed in the neighbor meeting, and I know a few of you came to that meeting, so thank you for doing that. I will sit down with every person that we abut and every person across the street from them and every person who wants to sit down with us in those neighborhoods. Personally sit down with them, look at their situation, look at their house, look at their view, and see what is the best we can do for your house. That might mean that we put some trees on your property. If you say, look, I'd really love you to just screen my deck right here. I don't want to see past my deck. We'd be happy to do that. We want to make it very custom. This is not a one-size-fits-all. So we want to sit down and talk with the folks in the community, learn more about their situation, and then make sure that we're buffering the very best we can do. One of the things that's very basic to being a good neighbor is not lighting up the night sky. These are 2 facilities that sit on Route 52. They're actually almost right next to each other. And I was driving home one night and thought, that's a perfect example. So the lighting on the left is what I call bad neighbor lighting. It's glare. And the lighting on the right is just gentle cones of light cascading down the wall. Nothing comes out or up. So, of course, this is the lighting we will use, and the lighting I've used for every building I've done in Chicagoland. So now talk a little bit about the employees. We want the very best employees. We know that you want good jobs, and we want the environment that good companies want to locate because they're confident they can get good employees, that their managers want to be working in. So we want to create an environment. So our next concern goes to the people in the park. And so one of the commitments we've made in the development agreement is that for any building that would have docks on 2 sides, all 4 corners of the building would have a facade treatment that looks like office. So it's very welcoming, very human scale. It also makes the buildings attractive from any direction. So somebody who's looking
who can see our building from the back or something sees a fairly attractive building. In addition to that, we want to create outside areas on, again, all four corners of the building. So any building that would have docks on both sides would have this treatment on all four corners. Any building that has just docks on one side would have this on both ends of the building. And the idea with this is to do two things. One is to create an outdoor area that employees can go outside and enjoy the setting of this park, which is very nice. But then also, as potential employees and managers pull up to the building, they get a very human scale. They see outdoor furniture, they see landscaping that's at a very human scale. So again, to attract the best employees, this is something we feel we want to do, and we're excited about it. One of the other things, and I'll admit, 30 years ago when I stood here and we came up with the standards for Rock Run, we didn't put sidewalks in, and I regret that. I think the world is changing, but we need to have people have the ability to get outside. That's what people want to do during their lunch, during their breaks. And again, if you're going to try to attract the best employees, you need to do that. So we're proposing not only a sidewalk, but actually a combination jogging path, bicycle path, and this would go all through the park. It would also allow people to get on it to go to these tremendous natural features that the park has with the Jackson Creek area. So that's another improvement we plan to make. As far as the environment, we do want this park to be the best next thing. So how do we do that? First of all, we plan to put electric car chargers on every building, and we've put that in the document. We want to promote the use of hybrid and all electric vehicles, and one of the ways to do that is to make sure that people who work here can charge their vehicle while they work. We hope, of course, that that's going to lead to the charging of trucks as we migrate eventually to electric trucks also. One of the big things that we plan to do is naturalized detention. It's something that I do have a lot of experience with and am very passionate about. This is a typical detention pond. It's a wet pond. When it rains, the pond fills up and eventually goes back down to this level. As we know, water does not soak into water. So nothing soaks into the ground. That's by design. Any wet pond is designed to just store the water temporarily and then shed 100% of it. So we're trying to go a different direction. We want the pond to end up looking like this. This is a facility I built on Weber Road, just north of 115th Street. And that is actually a detention pond. There's no pond to it. It's 100% plant material. And it's a tremendous habitat. It cleans the water, but the big thing it does is it migrates the water back into the ground. That is sitting right next to Lily Cache Creek, which is right there in the picture. And so we wanted to make sure we were doing a good job of cleaning the water before it went to that creek. We will be sitting next to Jackson Creek, and we want to make sure we take care of the water before it goes into Jackson Creek. The way that pond is designed is this plant material is put not just on the banks, but actually on the bottom of the pond, so that those deep roots grow, some as deep as 15 feet, and they break up the material so that water migrates back into the ground. This is what the bottom of a pond looks like if you do that. Now, that's not inexpensive. I just did a half-acre, tiny little pond, and it was over $20,000 just the plant material that went in the bottom. These ponds, will be much larger. But you end up with this after 3 years. So we love the system, and we think it'll provide a big benefit to the community as far as habitat and cleaning the water and migrating water back into the ground. The last piece that we want to talk a little bit about is community. What will this park do to better the community? And again, that's something that I feel like, the parks in the past have been focused on the park, taxes, and jobs, and that's great. But we want to go to the next step. So one of the things that we will do, and you can see a parking lot on the plan there, per your requirements, you require public access to a thing like Jackson Creek, I think that's a great idea. We plan to build a parking lot to facilitate that and the ability for people to come into the park, the community, to come into the park and enjoy that feature. Another thing we want to do to be different in the community aspect is we have a traffic study. We've submitted that traffic study. We want to update that traffic study on a regular basis. We've put that in the document. I think that's one of the issues that you all have seen is in some cases the traffic was more than estimated or different than estimated. That can happen. We've spent 18 months, doing our study, but at the same time, we want to commit to you that we would update that. And we think that's a novel idea and maybe something that everybody should do going forward. We plan to give a space in one of the buildings in the park, and being small buildings, they're perfectly sized for this, to provide some space that can be used as a learning and career center, where we can have hopefully a partnership. I know there's a gentleman here from Joliet Junior College. We'd love to sit down with JJC, and we have already in the past, but we'd love to sit down with them about working with them to help us staff this facility, to train people for the jobs that are there. And that's one of the most important things too, is that we build these facilities to be flexible. We own these facilities. We're not a flipper who builds and then just flips. So as the economy does change and migrates maybe to more manufacturing, or migrates to something that none of us know what that'll be, that these facilities will be flexible, and we want to be able to train the folks for the jobs that those facilities will require. And then the last piece, now I set that up for me to read it, but I'm not sure I can see it. So this is a community benefit committee, and you have some requirements about trying to use local labor and trying to employ local people. I want to take that to the next step and actually create a committee that some of you are on, we will be on, and we will collectively pick some additional people to be on that. I would be fine if somebody from the neighborhood wants to be on that and you think that's a good idea. I think that would be great. And the idea is for this committee to really make sure that we meet those goals, that we inform all the members of what's going on with the park, so that they're not calling the city to find out, hey, what's happening, that we're informing people on a regular basis of what's happening. The other thing that we want to do is make sure we're receiving the complaints. We're hearing from the constituents of those people on the committee that they're not happy about something, and we're taking care of that. And we want to make sure that, again, you're not the complaint department. We're getting that, and we're taking care of it. We want to have events to promote local contractors and subcontractors, which is something you encourage. Again, this committee would help codify that and make sure that happens. And I have this committee operating right now in a project in the 10th Ward of Chicago, and we're excited about the possibilities there. So this is an outgrowth of that. We want to promote training and placement of local residents into the permanent jobs in the facilities. So some advance notice of who's coming, who's the tenant that's coming, what are they going to need, and let's make sure we can train people up to be able to meet those needs for those jobs when they're ready. And that takes time. So, the last thing you want to do is find out somebody moved in, their hiring's already finished. We want to make sure that you're aware of who's coming so that we can try to funnel people into those jobs. We want to promote apprenticeship for local residents into the trade unions through this process. And the last thing we want to do is promote and coordinate community involvement. Everybody wants to see companies involved in the communities. We want to try to codify that by having this committee have the tenants be part of it, so that when there's a need in the city or there's a need in the community, we can say, look, this is something that you all can help with. Let's put our efforts together. And again, you would be part of this, we would be part of it, other community members, so that we can help organize that. So that is it for the unique parts of it. Other than building a first-class park, you can see the level of concern we go to. So certainly the facilities will reflect that same level of concern. Other than that, we will answer questions if you have them.
Yeah, I have a couple. About the prospective businesses, I know it's been represented that you guys are looking to pursue light industrial. Do you have anyone at the table? How far have they been brought to the city? How far along in the process are we with who's going to go in here?
Right. So we do build we develop on a speculative basis. Typically, I'd say 30% of our facilities end up being built to suit, which means before we start the facility, we know who the tenant is. That's not typical before we start the development. So we will get the development started. Corporate America is not very trusting that, okay, it's a farm field, have you solved all the problems? They really want to know the problems are solved before they'll commit. But we currently build and lease about 1 million square feet around the country every month. So we have a tremendous list of clients who are looking at all times. And we just have our first building going up in the 10th Ward. We bought the Ford Supplier campus there. It's all manufacturing. And now we have a 360,000-foot building going up, and we're negotiating, as that building is just going under roof, negotiating with a tenant to take that whole building.
Do you have a prospective light industrial user in mind, or is that just
No, not at this point. We will need to make believers out of folks that it's the real project. But we have a list of clients that we know at all times are looking, and we've certainly had inquiries to us that we can't fulfill at this point.
Okay. There were a few questions about the road widening. Could you speak to that, especially the areas of the road that are outside of Joliet's jurisdiction?
Right. So I did meet with the Township Highway Commissioner today. He was very gracious to take the time, so I appreciate that. As we discussed with him, it's not necessary that a road be in the city. What is necessary, whether it's in the city or not. So even the portion, and there's about a half a mile that's already in the city right now, but we still would have to go buy the right-of-way to do that. We'd have to buy an easement to construct on that portion, and we would have to buy easements to construct on the portion that is not in the city. It wouldn't be necessary that they come in the city, but it would be necessary that they sell us an easement to do that. So we are discussing with some of the neighbors the possibility of buying an easement for utilities and for roadway.
Okay. And then finally, there were questions about floodplain or floodwaters. You may have addressed that in your presentation, but is that an issue that neighbors need to know about or be aware of?
Yeah, and for those of you who were at the neighborhood meeting, and I think maybe you had a council meeting that night, so you might have left, but I bored them to tears with an explanation of detention. So there was a tremendous flood down there 5 weeks ago at this point. And that would not have happened had you had detention constructed. The whole concept with detention is we detain the water. Farm fields, what happened that day is it rained the day before ½ an inch. Farm fields were saturated, and then the next day the big rain came, and the farm fields didn't have any ability to absorb it. Detention would have captured that. So flooding is not an issue. We are very, very sensitive. I'm sorry, I keep doing that. I'm not even Italian, and I'm talking with my hands. That's my wife. And somebody had said, too, about the detention being taken over by the Forest Preserve, and that's definitely not the case. But again, we know there's a lot of floodplain there, and you'll see in the plan, and I don't know if we can go back to that. Do I have that ability? But we stayed out of all the floodplain. Again, because of your very progressive city creek ordinance, we stayed completely out of that. So I don't think it'll be an issue. And you can see that every building, even the detention is allowed by your code. So detention is allowed to be in the buffer, but not in the floodplain. So I don't think that'll be an issue. But like I told the residents, we work very closely with them to look at that property line, because we're going to build a berm, right? Well, berms are great. They block views and they block water. And we want to make sure that doesn't happen. That's where I think a lot of parks and developments fail, is in the buffering. They don't think about 60 feet wide, 30 feet to the top, 30 feet of water going down towards the resident. And we need to make sure we're capturing that.
Any other questions, comments? Yes.
All right, just to restate then, so there is no portion of the 103 acres in the conceptual plan that you're looking to turn over or give to the Forest Preserve District? That was,
No, somebody had asked us if, of the naturalized area, the creek and stuff that would remain, what would we do with that? And in Rock Run, we did, the Forest Preserve was interested in taking a deed to the western 55 acres. They wanted to do that, and so we did that. Certainly, if the Forest Preserve comes to us and says we'd like that, we would work with them. They want to make an amenity out of it, we're going to provide the parking lot, so the big cost would be done, and if they want to make an amenity out of that, that'd be great. Again, in Rock Run, we didn't do that. We didn't put something back there for public parking. Here we will, so the big cost will be done. But otherwise, we intend to, we'll take care of it and maintain it. But if somebody does, somebody that you approve would like to use it, like the Forest Preserve, that'd be fine.
so you wouldn't be approaching the Forest Preserve, but if they approach you, you'd be open to listen to what they want? Okay. Also, too, the mayor covered the manufacturing question I had. You did refer to the committee that would include the city, the developer, and members of the community. And you kind of referred to it coming through that committee to the developer as the complaint department. Would you be amenable to doing a quarterly or biannual report of the complaints that the complaint department has received and how they were solved?
Sure, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, we don't want to be the put it under the rug department.
Right.
Hey, they came to us with a complaint and we put that one under the rug. We don't want to do that. We want to solve the problem. So, yeah, letting you, providing a report to you that says, hey, this is what folks were complaining about and this is how we handle it, I think that's a great idea.
Okay. And then the only other thing that came up, and there seemed to be a couple of people that seemed concerned, what would be the interest of the developer to establish an enterprise zone?
So that's sort of standard language in our agreement. So I guess I would qualify it by saying if appropriate, but it would be an enterprise zone expansion. The enterprise zones are set, and so the only thing you can do now is expand them and add on to them. So I don't know if the criteria of the that speakers had posed applies there, but again, something we learned, and if that's the case, then it won't be applicable. So if applicable, it certainly would make sense to put in there.
Well, we have established, going back to 2012, enterprise zones down there, as you said, so now they can be expanded. So what you're saying is your reference to that is kind of a CYA, just in case things change and your needs would require it and the state allowed it, you'd be allowed to do it.
Right.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Anyone else?
I just have one question, Mayor.
Yes.
On the 103 acres, from approval to completion of that project, what kind of a time frame do you think you're looking at?
Well, it's going to depend on the acquisition of the right-of-way. So if we can get that done, and we're working on that already, that would take place in 2020. 2021, we commence improvements. And, that park would probably be a 3-year development.
Okay.
So 2024 or so.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The final ordinance is related to Council Memo 597-19, which relates to the ordinances associated with adult use cannabis. Council will recall several months ago, you adopted an ordinance imposing the 3% tax on cannabis sales, and we'd indicated that a second phase was required if the city was going to proceed with allowing adult use cannabis, and that related to land use and zoning. I'm going to turn it over to Kendall Jackson, who could go into a little bit of detail as to what the Plan Commission had recommended and what the ordinance before you entails.
Thank you, Steve. Mayor and members of the council, this item is related to staff bringing forward zoning rules regulating the siting or location of adult use or recreational facilities As you are aware, we have medical cannabis facilities allowed by ordinance in the RB, and that's restricted business, as well as our B3 and industrial zoning districts. We do have currently one medical cannabis dispensary and one medical cannabis cultivation facility. With regards to the adult use or recreational facility, staff did some extensive research, primarily with other states that have allowed this up to over a year now, and looked extensively at the Illinois State Act, and came up with a couple of different items. So the first thing is we are recommending restriction in certain zoning districts for the recreational cannabis. The central business district, and that's the B2 district, as well as the general business or B3 district, and in all industrial districts. And these facilities would only be allowed in those districts with the addition of getting a special use permit. The other item that we looked at was the downtown area in particular, and trying to balance the retail need for recreational cannabis with what we thought would be some community character issues. And so we are recommending an exclusion zone in the downtown, and that's primarily around select prominent downtown locations. Also, we are recommending that there be minimum setback requirements, if you will, from schools, and that's nursery schools, preschools, primary and secondary school, as well as daycare facilities, and that the minimum setback would be 500 feet. There is no state minimum for school facilities. Residential zoning districts, our recommendation is a setback of 250 feet. For the state law, there is no minimum setback for residential districts. And finally, if there is a pre-existing dispensary, that there be a 1,500-foot setback from a pre-existing dispensary, and that matches the state law minimum requirement. We are also recommending that there be a prohibition of any mobile dispensaries. There be a prohibition of drive-throughs. There be no on-site consumption. The special use permit application would come with an application fee, a traffic impact statement, parking plan, line queuing plan, an odor control plan, delivery plan, and security plan. These are all items that we found in effect for other locations that have allowed these types of facilities. The Plan Commission voted to recommend these zoning districts and setback locations, and would be happy to answer any other questions.
Questions?
Yeah, if
Yes.
I might. Kendall, just one quick question for you. As I went through that zoning piece, I did not see any sort of a cap, so it's wide open for as many businesses. Is that what, to your understanding as well?
Yes, so very good question, and that's something that we didn't feel at the staff level we were going to bring forward. That's more of a policy decision. We think that should come from the city council.
Yeah, I think so too, because I got an idea.
Well, I do too, I want to interrupt.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I'm done, as, you know, we've
Well,
got that open.
you know, the liquor commissioner, which comes out of my office, kind of regulates it, investigates, makes recommendations, and it comes to the council. Has there been any thought about that type of process with this?
Yes, there has been thought about that. Along with the special use permit, we would recommend either a process similar to a liquor license or a business license.
Mayor?
Yes.
Kendall, or maybe another staff member or the mayor might know, what are the setbacks under ordinance and/or state law for liquor sales?
We could find nothing in the state act with respect to liquor, and we have nothing that we're bringing forward with these regulations.
Right, do we have, I'm not sure to be honest, do we, in our ordinances for liquor, under the commission, do we have setbacks?
Yes, there are setbacks.
Are these the same setbacks?
No, they vary, and they're primarily for liquor establishments being set back from schools.
And what is our setback for liquor establishments from schools?
I don't have that number off the top.
Can you have that tomorrow?
Marty's gonna get it.
Oh, Marty's looking for, all right, I have one other question while Marty looks that up. So there'll be certain areas of the downtown that will be protected or off limits?
Correct.
Will there be certain areas of the mall, for instance, or will the mall be wide open for people at Louis Joliet Mall?
Yes, so the mall, as it's currently being presented here, would be open.
So they could put a store next to the theater where families go?
Correct.
It's, depends, we have to approve it at the council.
The council would have to approve it, yes.
I'm interrupting you. Why put or exclude downtown if ultimately this council is gonna make the decision? Why just single out that area of the city?
Right, so again, it was a balancing act that staff was trying to do with respect to primarily the museum, the library, the new courthouse. We were trying to balance what we thought was allowing retail establishments, but also that community character concern that we had.
Your Honor, just for clarification for you, you and I were on the same wavelength about the cap. So now that's a policy decision that we can set. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And Marty, while you're looking that up, do we open ourselves up for litigation if we let 3 cannabis stores in, say no to number 4 and 5, and then let the 6th one in?
Well, that would depend on how you do it. I mean, if you have a cap number, a hard cap, as you're probably familiar with some towns, they have liquor caps, and they say, hey, we only have X number, and then you open it up for one more. So if you did it that way, it would be permissible. But if you did it just, yes, no, depending on who you are, then that, of course.
Or depending on where they want to go?
Well, then you have to set that up again initially before.
That should be in the ordinance?
Be in the ordinance, yes.
I would, I'm sorry.
No, years ago.
I would suggest a cap, a hard cap, no more than, and this is just my number out there, no more than 3. 2, 3, and boom, hard cap, and that's it. That would be what I would look at. And I wouldn't want it to oversaturate our town. This is not what we're trying to do, but we would have a set a hard cap someplace in there. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
I want to explore the community, what did you go, community standard, community quality? What did you refer to?
Community character.
Character. Why would the community character be more important downtown and not out by the mall or along the Collins Street corridor? The families go there too.
Yes, but the library, the courthouse, these are establishments that we felt needed to have a little further protection with regards to not having these types of facilities located nearby.
Which businesses are we referring to?
Which businesses are referring
Yeah,
to?
you're saying there's established businesses that you think need further protection. What would they be?
Those would be the library, the museum, and the courthouse.
Oh, okay, I thought because you said businesses.
I meant establishments.
Okay. I'm not real comfortable necessarily with, carving out certain areas, but, if it's good here, it's good there. If it's bad here, it's bad there. But maybe I'm oversimplifying it. Thank you, Kendall.
You're welcome.
And if this passes tomorrow, we could still come back and tweak it, like Councilman McGavin's hard cap, which I think is probably a good idea.
Yeah, Mayor, that's a very good point. These are recommendations that we're bringing forward. At the council's discretion, we can change.
Mayor?
Yes.
One more question. You threw me a little bit there when you mentioned businesses versus, I see you're saying institutions, public institutions. Is there a prohibition within 500 feet of the West Side Library building?
The West Side Library building, I believe, is, and I'll have to double check on this, but that may have residential zoning. So that would be the prohibition.
It's near a school as well.
Correct.
But coming up through the back, if they were to, in that business. So I'm just trying to get my head around why just the downtown is getting that extra protection. Thank you, Kendall.
Mayor.
Yes.
I might have missed it. What about churches? Did I miss that? Or that's not
No,
it?
that is not, we do not have that. We do not have churches listed here.
So you had said you had looked like some of the other states. Was that?
Yeah, so the other states, the other towns that we've looked at, quite frankly, there's a wide range of setback requirements. Some don't require any setback from any other types of institutions. Some are more restrictive than what we're bringing forward here.
Was it any thought on churches or any discussion?
There was no discussion on churches.
All right, thank you.
Mayor, if it's okay, I'll just email those out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, our first resolution is associated with Agenda Memo 599-19, and this is a resolution that would authorize a second amendment to the Joliet Union Station lease agreement with Migraine Brewing. I think everyone knows that Union Station is a structure that's currently owned by the city, and when we entered into initial lease agreements to allow Migraine to redevelop the site and to move their brewery there, basically they did all the tenant improvements. We had some structural issues, we had HVAC, a number of other improvements that are always going to stay with the building. And that dollar amount came to about $840,000, which we reflected in their lease agreement that became rent credits. Thinking that stability was important to them, and they certainly agreed the stability aspect of it, we entered into a 10-year lease agreement. Well, as it turns out, because it was a governmental property having a long-term lease, that inadvertently affected their tax bill to the point of where the assessor looked at this lease value as having much more value in the initial years with less lease value over time. So it created a relatively heinous tax bill as opposed to equalizing it out over the full 10 years. So our legal staff negotiated with Migraine, had information from our assessor on how the machinations of these assessments occur, and we renegotiated what amounts to 2-year rolling leases. The amount of property tax paid would still be the same. It just puts it out in relatively equal bites over a 10-year period. So that's one part of this amendment. Number two, when we entered into this lease, they were basically doing work on our building. The lease began in September of 2007. I'm sorry, it started in 2016 when in effect the business opened in 2017. So we went back and gave them a lease credit while they were fixing our building. We didn't charge them for that lease amount. And lastly, we are looking to give them, let's call it a little bit of relief with regard to the lease payments due to the fact that there's going to be a pretty heinous spring and fall of 2020 due to construction. As everyone knows, the parking lot immediately across the street from Migraine is the lot that's being converted from city-owned to county-owned, and it'll be redone as part of the courthouse construction. And then we'll start doing work on the bus station. So in view of the fact that we're really going to put them through the ringer with regard to construction, there's a time period that's been adjusted with regard to rent not being due. And these are still credits. I mean, there's going to be a number of years until they owe us that first month's rent, and it's because of the fact that they're drawing down on that initial investment they did to our building. So if this amendment is approved, it will solve their tax problem, spread it out over time, in addition to taking care of some of the lease term provisions. Any questions? Council Memo 600-19 and 601-19 are two resolutions that relate to permanent easements for utility easements relating to the Loves project. I believe last meeting we also had an easement. So these are slowly being negotiated and executed by our staff. Any questions on that? Next item is Council Memo 602-19. And this is a resolution that approves an intergovernmental agreement with Will County Transportation Department. Will County is in the process of planning for the reconstruction of Briggs between Washington and I-80. And at present, the west leg of Washington and Briggs is under the city jurisdiction. This IGA provides a commitment for us to fund upgrade of traffic signals and utility work within that overall project, and the estimated amount of the city share is $45,898. Council Memo 603-19 is associated with that. This particular item appropriates MFT funds. The MFT funds for this project amount to $42,658.80, and then that remaining $3,000 or so would be coming out of our utility fund. Council Memo 604-19, pretty routine. This is a standard MFT resolution relating to Smith Avenue. Council Memo 605-19, this is a resolution approving the Second Amendment to the State Capital Grant Agreement that relates to our multimodal project. Council will recall that there were several phases of the multimodal project that were completed, and the PACE-related bus station was something that was held in abeyance until funding was identified. Since PACE is now working with state and federal folks, and that particular improvement is funded, this amendment would basically move the agreement deadline from September 30th, 2020, and extend it out to September 30th, 2022. Council Memo 606-19. This is a resolution accepting a grant from the Illinois Department of Commerce and Commerce and Economic Development for tourism marketing. We've had some pretty decent luck recently with Illinois Office of Tourism grants. This is a grant that was put together by our city clerk in conjunction with our efforts to market Joliet. As everyone knows, we have budgeted amounts within, actually in the city manager's budget every year, specifically for our Heritage Corridor activities. This grant actually funds half of what we would be spending. So it's $33,365 of outside money that would basically forego our expense of this amount. So thank you, Krista. Council Memo 607-19 is a resolution authorizing execution of the First Amendment of the agreement between Thornton's, the Will County Historical Society, and the City of Joliet. And I'm going to defer to Marty to explain the provisions of this amendment.
Thank you. On October 15, council entered into that development agreement with Will County Historical Society and Thornton's, and we knew going in that that was going to be a very tight schedule in order to get this accomplished before the end of the year. Obviously, we know that now did not happen. So in an effort to preserve the agreement between the parties set forth in that development agreement for the relocation of the Cassidy House and the issuance of the Class A license and the Class V video gaming permit, we have entered into an amended development agreement. So I'm just going to touch on very briefly on some of the changes. They're kind of laid out in the council memo, so I'll just touch on them again very quickly. The first thing is Thornton's Will County Historical Society shall not be entitled to movie expenses until certain covenants are done. And those are the ones that are laid out on behalf of the city and on behalf of the Will County Historical Society. On page 2, the house potentially would be located at the northeast corner of Jackson Street and Herkimer. There was a change from the original to the first amended as to the potential mover of the house to now devote house and building movers. The city requirements are again that, again, this is something that we just clarified as compared to the original agreement, that the Thorntons acknowledges that the Class A license and the Class V video gaming permit are contingent upon not only the council action, but a couple of other things, such as the inspection and approval by the Will County Health Department, construction of the improvements, etc. And then we have an outside termination or relocation date. So now what you have in front of you is a first amended and restated development agreement, because we've been, again, working on this thing over the past several days. So there is, if you look at the version that you have in front of you, the yellow is what is changed from the council packets. So one of the things that was spelled out, even though I think they probably had the authority to do it first, is that if the parties, specifically the city and Will County Historical Society, do not perform, it's still understood that Thornton's still gets the license and permit. And that language is carried out through in a couple of different spots. I'm not going to touch on the dates, and when I'm done, I'm going to have Mr. Hanson, if he's still here, step up and talk about the dates. So if you go to the very last page, those are the dates that are workable for the city. But I think there might be a discussion on whether those dates are workable for the other parties, so if you want to step up and...
Thank you, Mr. Shanahan. Michael Hanson, I'm representing the Will County Historical Society. As everyone knows, this has been a long, arduous project. We worked a lot on this amendment since the last the two council meetings. And Marty, I know one thing we're going to have to change. The location of this house is going to be, I think the address is 521 Jackson Street. It's not going to be at, it's not going to be moved to Herkimer and Jackson Street. But nonetheless, one thing that's very important as we enter this critical time period of weather and things of that nature, from our standpoint, Will County Historical Society is getting this process underway and getting it going. And Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for getting the liquor hearing set and for posting the notice and all that kind of information. But, we're asking the council before tomorrow night to consider a deadline of this, going back to the old deadline of December 31st of this year, for or actually the second council meeting in December rather than the end of January, because that's just losing a whole nother month is really critical to us to get it moved hopefully in February or March. I think the city, we all want it moved. The city wants to get going on the gas station. And I think that's the real question I have of the council tonight, is what it feels with respect to that deadline.
So I want to flip you again to the very last page, report to council. Right now I have it in as on or before January 7th, the City of Joliet Liquor Commissioner shall report its findings. I think what Mr. Hanson is asking is for December 17th.
Yeah, I spoke with my staff. I don't think that's possible with the current arrangement that we have. So, as you know, I don't have a full-time liquor commissioner anymore. So we'll have to deal with it, but I don't want to make a commitment that we can't keep.
Excuse me, Your Honor.
Yes.
I believe at the last meeting we talked about a little bit, I asked that same question. What was the holdup? What's taking us so if everything is done and we are looking at, as I read the ordinance before the amendment came, Marty made that change there. I was kind of wondering whether or not we were going to have some time in that. But I'm asking you because I knew what you needed. You needed the notice, you needed the hearing, you needed all of that. So we're at that point where we have gotten, I'm sorry, did I misunderstand you? We do have that all done now?
Well, it's in the process of, yeah.
In
it's
the
gonna go
process
ahead.
of getting
Yeah,
done.
absolutely, right.
So since,
We set a hearing date then too, in December.
and you set it for December the 11th, was it?
Yeah,
Is it
all
December?
the information, the liquor commissioner has done all that he has to do at this point. I think the question just remains if we have a hearing
Can
on
we-
December 11th, and we have a council meeting on December 16th, can we
That was gonna be-
possibly
I
get
wanted to make
report
sure I was
in
clear.
that time period, I think is the question.
And again, I met with my staff, and we do not believe we can do that. Remember, there's one full-time employee, 3 part-time, so I'm looking for the 3 part-time to put this all together. So no, I can't make the commitment. We could shoot for it, but I wouldn't, I don't think it's possible.
I would kind of like to see us shoot for it, Mayor, and I understand what you're saying, but I just, to me, the city operates sometimes like a well-oiled machine. And then we are at this point where we're kind of, stuck, and we're holding Thornton's, we're holding everybody else. We're kind of in limbo. So if the meeting is set for December 11th, what else do we need to be able to get that done?
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean,
by the 17th.
for 4
I'm
years, we
just-
did operate like a well-oiled machine. I agree. So it's unfortunate what's happening. There's no sense going into it publicly, but it's out of my control, apparently. I can't control what happens in my office anymore. I've been ordered, or there's people who've been ordered not to speak with me who work in the office.
Yeah.
So we're not operating like a well-oiled machine at all. But, Steve knows, I've appealed to Steve Jones about 10 different times to fix it. You're not going to, so we will try to make that date. We've set the hearing. We're doing our work, but it's a difficult situation we have right now.
Well, I appreciate anything you can do, and thank you. I know
And
you're
so do I.
trying hard to get this all accomplished, and I just wanted to make you aware of our position, and thank you, so.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
Typically, from the notice or from the hearing to the issuance, how long is that normally?
Several weeks, I believe, would be the normal process. Maybe a month.
I don't really know.
I don't know.
I'll have a liquor commissioner come tomorrow if you want, because we met about it this week to discuss this.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Mike, so you saying that they won't move the house unless they have the license?
That is correct. That's what Thornton's is saying, correct.
Because a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, there was the nail in the coffin. It was done. But now, then somebody
Well,
came up with.
that was a whole nother situation at that point in time. Then we looked into it more, and then we.
Right, they came up with the idea to get the gaming,
Right.
and then they took the nails out.
Yes, correct.
So now, they don't trust, the council has decided to give them the license. It's just a process to go through. So I don't understand Thornton not just fulfilling their part. I mean, what's the whole, they don't trust the city?
No, I don't think it's in not trust the fact. I'm not going to speak for Thornton's because I don't represent Thornton's at this time.
Well, are they here?
They're not here tonight, but you'd have to ask them, I guess. I think
They're not here?
No, they're not here tonight, unfortunately. They'll be here tomorrow night. You can ask them
I'll
the
ask.
questions. so.
Yeah. 'Cause, I just don't see why, they know they're gonna get the license eventually in January, so a couple weeks.
I mean, no, the issuance of any license is not guaranteed, right? That's for the council to decide, for the mayor to do, the liquor commissioner to do the investigation and everything, so.
Right, but they're not gonna move the house January the 7th, because before, last meeting, I thought it wasn't gonna be moved until the weather got better or something. Or maybe I misunderstood.
I'm not going to speak for Thornton's. Well, you can ask them the question tomorrow night, and they'll be
I
here to
will.
answer it, so.
All right, thank you.
Councilman, I can kind of, hearing what they had to say, I kind of paraphrase. Thornton's was afraid of putting forth the money to move the house and not having a guarantee of a license.
Right, that's right. So we'll ask them tomorrow. I'll ask them tomorrow.
That's fine.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, under bids and contracts, we have the normal slew of items. There are probably only 2 that really warrant discussion. Council Memo 609-19, this is a requested authorization to purchase public safety vehicles. Specifically, it relates to authorization to purchase 7 vehicles for our PD investigations and narcotics unit. Funding would come from our forfeiture fund, which basically is restricted to narcotics and investigative purposes. The dollar amount proposed is $172,338, and these prices were obtained utilizing the state purchasing program. Any questions on that? And then the one I'll jump down to is Council Memo 615-19. This is the request for authorization to approve amendment number 1 for our Rempe Sharp Downtown Floodplain Levee Floodwall Design Project. As Council knows, we've been kind of grappling with the designation of a floodplain downtown. In fact, the mayor had referenced it earlier in the discussion of perking. As we've worked our way through the Phase 1 study, our staff has had discussions with Rempe Sharp, and there's more engineering specifically related to soils testings, analysis, and preparing us for that eventuality where we go to the Corps of Engineers and say, okay, here's our study, this is the data, let's get this alternative selected that will help get the floodplain mitigated. So it's a lot of money. $96,000 is a big chunk of the original contract price, but our staff feels that this is really what's needed if the pathway is the actual construction of this improvement. This is a good way for us to go. We are still keeping open the possibility of some legislative rule change, let's call it interpretations in Washington, but we need to start designing this and moving forward with a solution in case we don't get relief from Washington. So $96,000, it's a lot as a percentage based on the initial contract, but it's money well spent.
Mayor? Yes. And if you don't mind, Steve, I'm going to expand on that because you're correct. 96,000 seems like a big number. But to oversimplify it for people like myself and maybe the rest of us in the council and engineers, currently with approval of the Army Corps of Engineers, we're spending what was it, Jim? 6.3 million was the estimate?
Yeah, the folks from Rempe Sharp were actually at our public service today. They did a real nice explanation. And the original thought was for this flood protection wall, we thought it was going to be concrete and sheet pile at first. Now it looks like it may be an earthen embankment. It's about $6.5 million, and I think now maybe down to $4.8 million we go in this route. The other thing is, the big push is to try to get Corps of Engineer grant money to construct it. That's where the money is, in construction. And Rempe Sharp is pushing very hard with the Corps, and they work very closely with the Corps so far on this preliminary design, and they believe that we may be able to be eligible of up to about 66% construction money, which is very, very important. So bottom line, sometimes you got to spend a little bit more on some of the engineering up front for the big money. The big money isn't going to be in construction.
And it will drop at approximately 1.7 million by estimate.
Yes.
So of which we're going to, even if we get the Army Corps or the federal dollars, we still have to pay 35% of that. So we will save money in the long run. Rempe Sharp presented it to us today, and they essentially said all things look like they're going great with the Army Corps. The Army Corps seemed very, very happy with the earthen design, and then final approval is always final approval.
Sure.
But that's why there's such a big increase, because you got to spend that money to save the other 1.7 million.
And the money we're spending on engineering, that could go, part of that money will go towards that 34%, 35%.
Yes.
Jim, the property that we're infringing on, is that forest preserve property along the side of the canal?
A large percentage is forest preserve, Will County, which we have a good relationship with. U.S. Steel has a portion of the property. Then there's a warehouse facility. I forgot the owner there. And I think there's one other property right by Ruby, just north of Ruby Street.
So is this right away we have to purchase?
We're going to most likely have to get right away to do this improvement, yes. Mm-hmm. But that's all part of this big project, yes.
The last item, usually I don't talk about what I'm going to do under city manager's report, but tomorrow is that once-a-year event when we give the council the city manager's proposed budget that will be dropped on the dais for each of you tomorrow. And the motion includes the establishment of 2 dates for potential budget meetings, November 25th and December 11th. At the last meeting, we asked you to start checking your calendars. Please do so, because if those dates don't work, we'd certainly look to come up with some sort of an alternative date. And keep in mind, we do need to pass the budget by the last meeting in December. That's it.
Next is public comments. Is there anyone that would like to speak under public comments this evening?
Hi, I'm Nancy Bartels with, I live in Elwood, Jackson Township, and I just had a couple of any comments here. I was just going to say, as you make your decision for voting on ordinance 59719, please take your time, do your research, make informed, educated decisions, consider the long-term implications of rezoning farmland in Elwood. What will your legacy as a council member be? Will it be something like the steel mills with empty buildings, or a thriving economic, sustainable community where people have well-paying jobs, good schools, and where they can raise their families so they can live and grow? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
You good with 3? Okay.